Why do greasy foods bother my stomach? I think the source of the grease has a lot to do with it. The quantity or the amount of the grease has a lot to do with it. And then I want to talk to you about the three most important players in the digestion process of greases. Just so you know, in this video, when I say grease, I mean oil, I mean fat. I'm going to use all those terms interchangeably. So if you hear grease, oil, or fat, they all mean the same thing in this video. Let's get into it. First and foremost, the source, the type of fat that is most likely to bother your digestion is going to be refined seed oils. No good, okay? Examples of these are soy, grapeseed, canola. You've probably seen these on labels before. But these oils are highly processed. They go through a very unnatural process to get turned into the form they're used in a lot of cooking and in a lot of packaged foods. So when our body takes in those foods, they're kind of familiar, but there's definitely something wrong, something different about them, and that can disrupt the way the body responds to those foods. So we want to avoid refined seed oils. Next thing is the quantity. A lot of people unknowingly, especially when they dine out, take in 4 to 5 tablespoons of fat at a meal. Now, to give you some idea, that translates to about 45 to 50 grams of fat. And that is a big dose of fat for one meal. For some people, that might be their whole day's intake of fat. Some people can tolerate that much fat, but whether you can tolerate that volume or not, if it comes from this source, it's really overwhelming to the body. A lot of people also do have trouble with that volume, so we find the sweet spot for fat at a meal tends to be more like 2 to 3 tablespoons at a meal. So we wouldn't do that much. Instead, we look at 2 to 3 tablespoons. The fat in meals that we dine out and get is really tricky because there's already fat in certain foods. The cut of meat that you have, the sauce that's on whatever the dish is. But often the foods are also prepared in some kind of oil, especially fried foods, and that increases the fat content beyond what was naturally occurring in the food. So these oils are real sneaky, and they can bump up that quantity without you even thinking about it. The 3 parts of the body that have to function optimally in order to make sure we're really digesting our fat. The mouth is first and foremost. Okay? And that's because of something called lingual lipase. This is an enzyme that breaks apart fat. It's made by our saliva glands. When you've heard people say, you got to chew your food thoroughly, one of the reasons for that is to make sure that the food has enough time to interact with this lingual lipase in your saliva, in your mouth, before it travels to your stomach. Because when that fat travels to your stomach, even though some of the lingual lipase will still be with it, it's not as active in the presence of stomach acid. Stomach acid becomes the dominant thing. So we want to have the food with the fat in it in our mouth long enough to actually impact it correctly. Next part of your body is your liver and gallbladder, and that's because our friend bile. Bile is this wonderful little thing that takes a piece of fat, let's say a piece of fat is that big, and breaks it apart for us. I want to explain why that's so important. So let's say that this was 4 grams of fat, and it just broke it broke down into 1 gram pieces because of that bile. That might not sound like a big deal to you, but what it also did was it greatly increased the surface area of that fat by breaking it apart. There's much more surface area now because all these edges here that weren't exposed are now exposed. And that matters because your pancreas is going to secrete some different kinds of enzymes, different than what your mouth has, to further the breakdown of fat. But those enzymes need a lot of surface area to have a chance. The pancreatic enzymes that digest fat do not do well with big pieces of fat. They need it broken down into smaller pieces. So to really digest fat, whether it's a good source or a bad source, we definitely want to avoid those refined seed oils. And regardless of the amount, even though we know per meal 2 to 3 tablespoons would be ideal, we got to make sure that the food is in our mouth long enough to allow the lingual lipase to affect it. We got to make sure our liver and gallbladder are producing and secreting adequate bile so that the enzymes that our pancreas makes can actually break down the fat further so we can absorb it and all the nutrients. So if you're having trouble digesting greasy foods, if they always upset you, reach out to us, let us know, and what we'll help you do is assess what's going on. What are your sources? What are your amounts? Are all the parts of your body that digest fat working the right way? Thank you for watching this. You'll see more content coming soon. I hope you have a great day.